In today's tutorial, I will show you how to set up Shadcn UI using React, JavaScript, and Vite. To get started, I will go to documentation, then click installation, then Vite. Once you're on this page, copy the first command here. Switching over to my VS Code, I have an empty project here, and I open up the integrated terminal, and I will now paste in the command and hit enter. It will prompt you to enter a project name. Just name the project whatever you would like. I will just name it the default project by hitting enter. Then I will select React, then JavaScript, follow the instructions here, so switch into my project, and then I will run npm install to install the packages. Once that is done, I can just run npm run dev just to make sure it's all working correctly. You should see this message, and if we open up the address here, we will now see our React app that was built using Vite. For the next step, we can go back to the documentation and copy this command to install Tailwind. Switching back to VS Code, I will now paste the command I just copied. Once this is completed, we can go back to documentation and copy this code block here. And then we need to create a new file, but instead of calling it jsconfig.json, because we're using JavaScript, we'll just call it jsconfig.json instead. Going back to VS Code, I will create a new file called jsconfig.json, then paste in what we copied earlier and hit save. One small thing I noticed is that this file is not in the same folder as the rest of my files. This shouldn't be the case for you, but if it is, just make sure it's all in the same folder. I noticed this mistake once I finished making my video, but as long as you have this file with the rest of your files, then everything should work as expected. And for most of this tutorial, you will see this file outside of this folder, but just ignore that as I eventually will fix that toward the end of this video. Once you have completed this step, we can go back to documentation again and just scroll down a little bit and copy the code block that you see here. Now we will update the file in our repo called vite.config.js because we're using JavaScript. And so I'll just go to that file now and then paste in the code block that we just copied and hit save. Don't worry if you see this error. We will just continue following the documentation and the rest of this process will still work. Going back to the docs, if we scroll down some more, we can just copy this command. Going back to my terminal, I will now just paste in the command. It will prompt us to answer some questions. The first one is if we would like to use TypeScript, but since we're using JavaScript, I will just select no. For the style, I would just choose default. For the color, I would choose slate. When it asks where your global CSS file is, I would just point it to my index.css file. So I'll just type in source/index.css and hit enter. If you're using CSS variables, select yes, but in this case, I'm going to select no. If you're using a custom Tailwind prefix, then just type it here, but I'm not going to be doing that, so I'll just hit enter to leave it blank. Here, you can just hit enter. We can just hit enter again for the import alias. And then for the import alias for utils, just hit enter. And if you're using React Server components, select yes, but in this case, I'm not, so I'll select no. And then just click yes to proceed with the installation. Once this process is complete, we can now start importing components from the Shadcn UI library. Going back to documentation one last time, we can copy this command here to install the button component from the Shadcn UI library. Then we can run the command inside our terminal to actually install the component. Once that's finished, we can open our app.jsx file and then erase everything inside of here. Going back to documentation, I will just copy the import button code here to import the actual button component. Then I will copy the code here to actually display the button, and I'll get rid of this unused code and hit save. Inside our terminal, run the command npm run dev to actually start the React app. Once we go to this address, you should now see the React app running and the Shadcn button component here. That is the end of this tutorial. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe for more content.